Hello, just wanted to pop on and chat to you about sensory profiles. Now, these are something that people often ask me about and what they are and when should I get them and what do they involve? What's the purpose of them? So I wanted to pop on chat about all of these things to give you a little bit more education about their role and when you might want to access them. So traditionally, sensory profiles are something that are completed by occupational therapists. They're to do with assessing the senses of a person. So looking at the way what our heightened senses might be, so how we can tolerate touch, how we can tolerate how our hearing reacts to what we would class as normal everyday senses. So if we're in a shopping centre, for example, so how we react to the noise in those places, or how we react to the people that are around us, whether or not our anxiety is raised when there's lots of people around us. Maybe if people are brushing past us, if they touch us, is that sense raised if someone brushes past us? Do we need to move a lot to actually maintain our sense of calm? So you will notice that some people with, say, autism or some particular behaviours will need to rock or flap their arms. My son, for example, he bangs his head when he's going to sleep. It's a stim to actually calm himself right down. Other people need to wear headphones when they're in a heightened noise environment to actually keep their anxiety quite calm. Other people find it really quite difficult to concentrate when there's a lot of distractions on walls, or there's a lot of people, because they can't actually see a person. They'll actually be distracted by everything behind the person. So they're visual. They're distracted by visual disturbances. Okay, so we need to often work out what senses are actually heightened, and then work out how we can actually manage these, and so that a person can actually reach their full potential and participate in a normal lifestyle, what we've in general community, and manage their moods so that they can participate effectively and be calm and happy in their life. Now, so an occupational therapist is awesome for completing a really thorough sensory profile. Another way of doing a sensory profile, because these quite often cost quite a few $100s to actually complete, and then they work on a full occupational therapy program. So where they might go into a gym type program or other programs associated with that. So depending on the sensory needs of your child or adult, because adults can also participate in these as well, you may or may not want to actually do those, and depending on your financial needs as well. Sometimes you actually might just want a screener to go, I'm not sure whether or not there's there is sensory overload, or there's heightened sensory needs, or whether it's that or not. Is there some way we can just work out whether there's a need? So I actually complete a sensory screener. So it is in form a sensory profile, but we don't actually go into the full program and everything afterwards. So basically what it is, it's completing a questionnaire, which is exactly the same thing as an occupational therapist does, but I'm not an occupational therapist. My background is in education. And that's the purpose of these sensory profile screeners that I complete. So it's a questionnaire which looks at all of the areas. So we're looking at movement, we're looking at touch, we're looking at smell, we're looking at hearing, we're looking at the visual spatial sort of stimulations. We're looking at eye contact, and we're looking at it from a home perspective, but we're also looking at it, I'm looking at it from an educational perspective, so that we can see whether or not there are things that we can recommend in a report so that we can develop an individual learning plan or an educational program to support your teacher or the school to enable your child to meet their potential. So for an example of that might be if your child is easily distracted. So maybe or maybe not they have been diagnosed with attention deficit disorders, so hyperactivity disorders, whether that's the hyperactivity component or attention component, so they're easily distracted, so they might not have the hyperactive component, they may be just easily distracted. So, and when through the questions, the answers to the questions, we can determine whether or not maybe they're actually distracted by, for example, some classrooms have an enormous amount of decorations and things on their walls, and if they're not evenly spaced or if they're all at weird angles and all really different colours, this is really quite distracting for some children, and they're more interested in looking at which ones are not quite straight versus what's actually on their page. Okay, so we can put recommendations like those in place that maybe we limit those things or where the child is placed. So if teachers have got those things on the walls, the child is not placed where they're facing those things. Another thing is if when the child gets their classwork, there's not all pictures and things all over their worksheets, that those children are given worksheets without all the additional pictures on them. And maybe there's only 3 or 4 learning tasks on a worksheet or even less, so that they can focus just on that particular learning task and not all the pretty things that they can then colour in at the same time, because that's a distractor. Other things, if they're really caught up in the noise, so maybe their background noise is an issue, then we can recommend the use of headphones. So not ones that are plugged into a device, but noise cancelling headphones, which are often really, really supportive to children who get caught up in background noise. They might not be part of the conversations or anything else, but especially during new learning and assessment type, so tests or quizzes or things like that, they can actually wear their headphones and then tune into that particular learning task. There is loads of different recommendations that we can make based on the sensory needs of the child. So it's not just your teacher saying, Levi, Liam, Joanna, you need to block everyone else out and focus. Kids, a lot of children with these sensory needs, they don't have the ability to be able to do that. So we need to put strategies, actually learning strategies in place to be able to do that. Okay, so that's what a lot of the sensory profile does. Okay, so we can actually go, that's why this happens. Also, depending on the answers to questions, we can also say that child is actually moving around the room, okay, and they're biting their clothes and things. They've actually got a heightened sense of anxiety because they're worried about being touched. Okay, so it'll depend on the answers to particular questions, but we can make links between certain things. And it's not until we see the answers to all of the different questions between the different sensory areas that we can make links. Okay, and then with an interview between myself and you as the carers, we can definitely make those links, and we can make some recommendations to the school and the teacher. It's interesting to then go, we can then also make up a sensory kit where required, which may or may not even include some essential oils, which actually have a real calming effect, especially if there's an anxiety component there, or if they've got a particular preference to a particular smell that actually can really calm them down, or raise their sense of focus and need. So if they're a child which has already been identified as having ADHD or has the tendencies which with ADHD, there's some amazing essential oils which really support those behaviours in children, and I've seen it work. Okay, so that's what a sensory profile is. So we've got the two different types, and sometimes even once we've done the screener, sometimes if there's loads of different areas which have got heightened areas of sensory requirements, sometimes we then do say, hey, look, you may be best to head off to an OT and even take this report with you, and an OT would definitely be able to help further as an ongoing support with this. And other ones can go, look, you can, but for the next 6 months or so, let's just work on these particular skills and let's see how we go. And I can either continue working with you or you can go off on your merry way, and let's see how we go with that. So some definite positives there, which really often give the teachers a really great focus for what to actually place in their individual learning plans or individual education plans. So a great start, especially at this early part of the year when some of those behaviours might be starting to creep in as your child is getting more familiar with their teachers, and that honeymoon period is starting to be over. And you may start to get those phone calls and emails about behaviours creeping in. All right. So if you're interested in chatting to me about sensory profiles or any of the other services that I provide, please send me a message, give me a call, and I'm more than happy to chat. All right. Hopefully that was of use. All right. See you later. Bye-bye.